G'day folks, welcome to this playthrough of Ardennes 44, The Battle of the Bulge. This is another wonderful Simonitch design published by GMT Games originally in 2003. This is my first edition copy, which I haven't yet played. It's first edition. I am using the first edition rules straight out of the box. There are, of course, second edition rules, third edition rules, there are living rules from about 2014, but I'm just sticking with this. Just for some simplicity, I guess. So I'm all set up. I haven't played this before. As a Simonitch game, it uses a lot of the rules elements of his other World War II battle game series, like Normandy 44, Holland 44, and so forth. So there's a lot reading through the rules that I'm familiar with. At the same time, there are a lot of title-specific rules. There are rules for traffic and roadblocks. There are a lot of, if I can try and zoom in, there are a lot of location-specific rules. So we have, for example, the severe roadblock areas. There's one here, you can see the yellow bordered hex here. Where are the other ones? There might be one over here, and somewhere else in there, there's a yellow hex, I think it's here. There are divisional movement lines, which you can see, army movement lines, I think they may be, along the area, which restricts early German movement to their historical corridors. There are, what other exceptional rules are there? Weather effects, restricted air operations until I think the 20th, later in the first week, basically. Units become isolated, they can surrender. There are night turns, which I don't recall from Normandy, which kind of gives you a special night turn operation where you can place these little night markers during your PM turn, and that gives your units, the units or the stacks under these counters, a reserve night movement, so good for night exploitation. There are, what else? Special artillery rules and special artillery movement rules. You can see this artillery piece here has 0 movement, and they'll need to use these prime movers to move anywhere, basically. There are fairly simple replacement point rules, easier than Normandy 44. That's the most recent one I played, so it's one that is most vivid in my memory. What else are there? There are a lot of special units. So you've got some units of Kampfgruppe Piper up here. You can see the little KG Piper here. I've already forgotten the rules for these guys. They get a special exploitation move, I think. I've got the rules right here in front of me. They can move on and fight on the first night turn, even if they moved and attack, even if they have those night move markers under them. There are, what else? There are special rules for British units, they come on later. There are Sturmtigers and Brumbars. I'm not very familiar with these. These basically are German heavy tanks equipped with short-range sort of mortar weapons. I think a 38cm mortar on a Sturmtiger. So they do well in sort of urban terrain when attacking into those areas. There are some units up here. These guys here with their red setup counters, they're restricted. They can't retreat on the first turn. They've preceding this period, they had fought hard to gain some ground, and they're reluctant to give it up. I have the game set up. You may notice you're kind of looking at the counters upside down. That's because I've set them all up sort of facing this side of the board. So I'm going to sort of sit up this end of the table, and as the battle progresses, I'll sort of shift my attention around this way. So that's why you're kind of, it's hard, this makes it hard to set up the camera because I'm right up against the board. I've done that so that I have plenty of room for expansion. This is a huge map, plenty of room for expansion across the map, and then I have my reinforcement tables set up over here. In hindsight, maybe it would have been good to put this over this side and have more room for the map. But this is where the Germans are aiming for, the Meuse. There are various potential victory conditions. The Germans can try to capture the 4 hexes of Liège. They can try to get, I think it's 20 steps of units off the map in the west. they can try to capture, I think it's 4 victory locations along the Meuse. Ardennes is one of them. Givet up here. So there are a few of those around the area. Yeah, so various options. I don't I don't like the idea of trying to capture Liège. I'm kind of ruling that out immediately. For various reasons. I have not played this before. I think I've said that earlier. But I think the idea of capturing those 4 hexes of Liège is going to be pretty hard. And I like the idea better of sort of pushing past, once we kind of can move past this area, if I can get past there, I like the idea of either capturing those 4 towns along the Meuse or shifting forces off the western map edge. That's the German objective. The Americans, of course, are trying to stop them. Now, as the first time playing this game, I have printed off sort of a rules reminder sheet, and I've already begun sort of highlighting some key rules that I'm worried about missing. In particular, the Allies are going to be very careful to manage their reinforcements and to get them into places quickly. And to do that, you can see what the section I've highlighted there is the Allied strategic movement rules, because the Allies can use strategic movement for ×2 movement for mech units, and they can use trucks for non-mech units to give them 12 movement points and to enable them to move as mech units. So you can place this on a sort of an infantry unit and they get 12 movement points using the mechanized movement rates. So yeah, that is going to be very important. I feel ahead of time that getting these allied reinforcements into place is going to be critical, and I don't want to miss any of those rules. Here you see the CRT. It's a very, what's the word for it? Diverse CRT. There are a lot of different combat results, as you can see here. This is a summary of all the different combat results. It's quite a long summary as far as CRTs go. You have defender step losses. You have defender. This is basically D1 asterisk is, if my memory serves me well, defender loses a step, has to retreat 4 hexes. The attacker then, here it is here, can do a bonus advance and break through combat. The defender becomes disrupted. Again, this is first edition. Some of the things have changed here from into the second and third edition. Then you've got sort of, as we go down, the attacker wants a low roll, as you can see. DR4 is just defender retreats 4 hexes, a lot of retreat results. There are zones of control, and there are ZOC bonds, as in Simonitch's other games. This is where, now for example, across these 2 American units, if I can zoom in a little bit. So these 2 American units here provide or create a ZOC bond between them. They're surrounded by zones of control, and they create a ZOC bond which prevents German units from moving into this hex. So this German infantry here, they cannot move in there because of this ZOC bond. Units can also create a ZOC hex side bond, which prevents a German unit, hypothetically, from moving from this hex into this hex. And this is a core part of many of Mark's designs. It creates very interesting ZOC effects. And for a relatively inexperienced player, it is something to be very attentive to. I recall when I played Normandy 44, I was forgetting about this a lot. So I'm going to really try and pay attention to those ZOCs. Yeah. What else? Look, there's bridge demolition, of course. What would a bold game be without bridge demolition? There is offensive and defensive artillery, with some interesting defensive artillery basically rolls to see its effect. Units can disengage from the enemy. I'll need to reread those rules as well. Units out of supply can become isolated and then can potentially surrender. Units become engaged in battle. They become engaged in firefights, the FF. Again, I'll probably need to read those a bit more closely. I am not using a lot of the optional rules. I'm not using fuel dumps. I'm not using the optional units. They've all been taken out of the game. This is a map summarizing the various victory hex locations. What else have we got? Advanced results are not too complex, sorry about that. Pretty straightforward. A lot of different effects on column shifts. I've mentioned prime movers, silhouetted tank units. These are pretty important in combat. They have the potential to add an armored column shift. Some of the special units. These guys, this is of course of under height drops. You roll to see if they're successful. On a 4 to 6, they're eliminated completely. Some more surrender rules. Skorzeny's 150 Panzer Brigade, they're up there. Now they come on as turn 2 reinforcements, and they can potentially ignore enemy zones of control. So this is another one counter, and let me show you. This is them here. So when this counter comes on in the second turn, the PM turn on the 16th, they can try to avoid enemy zones of control. And if they roll a 1 to 3, they succeed and can keep moving, ignoring that zone of control. And they can also launch, I think, a special attack and ambush on enemy units. And a summary of the terrain costs. Pretty straightforward. You've got some major roads, secondary roads. There is clear terrain. There is lightly wooded terrain, which isn't too bad to move through. Then you have the forests, and these are, you can see the map has a lot of this forest terrain. Armoured units don't like that, so they have to move through this using the roads. And you can see a nice little corridor of roads and non-wooded terrain through here, this towards Bastogne. This would be nice to move through. I mean, I kind of already have my idea of what I want to do. Then you have this, I'm going to draw your attention down here to the area just west, sort of just southeast of Wilts, this what's called wooded rough hex, and this is very interesting terrain. It's effectively serves. It's in effect a valley. This is in effect a valley with a river, but it is treated as in effect river terrain that armored units can't move into. Yeah, so you want to kind of keep your armored units, mech units, all units in fact, away from that terrain. It's not terrain that is beneficial to the defender because it's in effect in a valley. So there's sort of a high ground, low ground advantage rule that applies. And my thinking is just to avoid it as much as possible. The Germans don't want to be traveling near it, and the Americans don't want to be defending in it. So yeah, it's kind of scattered around. There's a big block here. This is familiar terrain there. There's some in the middle, and some up here. So I've been kind of thinking and looking at initial plans. I don't have too much of an idea at present. Certainly I'll try to push out with the 7th Army across here, but that's not a main priority. My priority really lies in this centre through until this area here. I'm going to try to avoid the ridge here and shift around through Andler to Saint-Vie, up towards Hoffelays. And this is where I think I'm going to try to converge most of my attention. Vilsam, Hoffelays, Bastogne. If I can, as the Germans, if I can secure those three, I should have not just a corridor, but opportunity for expansion. So the Americans are going to really struggle, even if I capture Hoffelays and Vilsam quite quickly, the Americans will struggle to cover every exit from those areas. Bastogne, obviously, is a priority. In terms of how I'm going to get there, across the bridges, down the roads, through the clear terrain, hey presto. There is tactical movement where units can move 2 spaces, but ignoring terrain costs. It enables me to kind of look for opportunities to lock American units into those zones of control. Now, because the combat results table doesn't have many defender losses, I'm really going to be looking for those losses caused by inadequate retreat paths. I've been bumping counters by accident. By that I mean surrounding American units with a zone of control. But if I can surround some of these American units, cut off their zones of their retreat paths with German zones of control, force them to retreat, they will then suffer step losses. And I think that's going to be critical to the German advance, not just advancing, but eliminating these American units. If the Americans can be allowed to retreat, I think the Germans will really struggle to open up their advance. So that's kind of what I'm thinking in terms of sort of tactical, operational movement. The priority is not just to clear these roads, but to eliminate these Americans. Not just to win the battles, not just to force these retreats, but to actually eliminate these Americans. What else do we have? Yeah, a lot of counters over here to the right. We have these surrender counters which build up, blown bridges and repair markers, disrupted out of supply, attacker advantage, and engage markers which come out as a result of combat. There are these grief and traffic counters which are placed on the board during the traffic marker phase, and they add additional movement point costs to those roads, and both sides get to place those. Yeah, so I'm going to play through this and report on progress as I go. And yeah, stay tuned, and I'll report back soon. This will be Ardennes 44, the Battle of the Bulge.